people in this country, you know, like the senators, and that there was a big problem. Farmers were late their mortgage payments. None of the workers in the state system came.
Well, in the first, I didn't like the idea when somebody told me when I could sell for grain, and they were told it off the market.
Crops was to seed. Corn was 10, 15 per bushel.
Farming has always been an uncertain occupation. Things like wind, rain, may severely alter a farmer's chance for a good crop. There are boom times and there are Texas. The period of time that preceded the Depression was a boom time. When the stock market crashed in 1929, things really changed and the Great Depression hit the farmers. Because farmers are traditionally independent producers, they aren't the type of people to unite. But when hard times hit, they worked together for their common cause. There was no worse time for farmers than the Great Depression. The farmers needed a way to voice their problems. This presentation will examine a group of farmers that joined together to communicate these problems through actions. Farmers Holiday Association. During World War I, agriculture prospered greatly. Agriculture as a whole, including individual farmers and their families, suffered a depression through most of the 1920s. The decline in farm prices preceded the total economic collapse of 1929. After the 1928 elections and the stock market crash in 1929, many farmers were unable to obtain additional financing to carry out their lives on the family farm. Farm prices fell lower than they had ever been in the history of the United States. The result of this was many families, forced by foreclosure, had to leave their homes. The way things were being handled upset many of the farmers. They decided to make their voices heard and to communicate to the government the severity of the farm crisis. Thus, the Farmers Holiday Association was formed. John Bush had the idea of this group and made his ideas known to a group of young liberals in his community. He explained his concept of the farmers taking a holiday from the ridiculously low prices that were being offered for farm products. His program rested on 4 main points. 1. The farmers demanded a moratorium at once, which was an extension of loans. 2. A price level for farm products that was equal to the cost of production. 3. Abolishment of the Federal Reserve. And 4. In the event of another war, all corporation profits involved in the manufacture of war materials were to be taxed 100%. If the demands of the farmers were not met, then all farmers were to be asked to go on a strike. They wouldn't sell any farm products or pay any mortgage debts until their demands were met. After this initial small meeting, ideas were communicated to similar groups around the country. These ideas spread quickly throughout Minnesota and the nation. Soon, a national Farmers Holiday Association was formed. The farmers that were a part of the holiday used a variety of methods to communicate the severity of the farm crisis.
He came in town, he had a can of cream, and then he had a pail of tomatoes he was going to trade for groceries. And they stopped him, and they poured all his cream on the ground, and they dumped all his tomatoes in the ditch, and unhitched his team of horses and tied them to the wagon. And so he walked into town and he told the sheriff about it.
Well, what they had a belt about this wide, full of spikes, you see. Now we put that across the road. That sounds kind of silly now, but it stopped them.
They also held foreclosure sales, which they called penny auctions or 1-cent sales. The people bid only pennies for the merchandise.
And there was 3,000 farmers there from all over Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota. And there was a hard core of radicals, about 150. And when they started to sale, they put out a cow to sell and they bid 25 cents on it. Well, then these guys that were conducting the sale tried to leave, and the crowd was really in a bad mood. You can imagine what that was like. And I always thought if somebody would have said, hang them, I believe they'd have did it.
They made the point. I mean, they got publicity, they made headlines, and they showed people how desperate they were. Yeah. So in that sense, it was a very effective communication tool and very effective propaganda tool to hold these demonstrations and hold the penny auctions and things like that.
Using these actions, the farmers' resistance had great impact on others throughout the nation, as well as Congress and President Roosevelt. The farmers felt that they were gaining new respect. The Farmers Holiday Association made demands on state and national governments. On February 18, 1933, Minnesota Governor Floyd B. Olson was asked to declare a moratorium on mortgage foreclosures. A week later, a moratorium was passed, as well as a farm relief bill to settle the dairy strike.
When President Roosevelt got elected in 32, he changed this economy around. Of course, it didn't change in a few months or so. It took a year or two. Like I'd say in 32 when he got in, but about 1935 or 1936, the economy was pretty good. The farmers were getting fairly good, decent prices for their commodities.
Because of the farm holidays' demands and protests, changes were made. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed this message down to holiday members. If they had not built the tremendous prairie fire in the National Farmers Holiday Association, the remedial legislation would not have been possible. It is estimated that several million farms and homes were saved as a result of the National Farmers Holiday Association. They are credited for making legislation possible in Minnesota as well as in the United States. The farmers in Minnesota made up over half of the total national membership, and almost half of the program and influential events occurred in Minnesota. While we researched this project, we found that groundswell, a farm movement of the mid-1980s, was similar to the holiday. There's a parallel between them. They used numerous tactics that were the same, but adjusted for the times. This is an example of history repeating itself, both considered radical by most people. Oral history is pertinent to our understanding of the past. It shows all sides of an issue, rather than one person's biased opinion. When we began researching for this presentation, everything that we read was very pro-holiday. As we learned more and interviewed people, this attitude seemed to change. The more people we talked to about the holiday, the more opposition we encountered. This astonished us, because everything that we had previously learned was being challenged. We found more and more of this as we researched. When we talked to farmers who were at this time, approximately 3/4 of them were opposed to the holiday. If it weren't for oral history, it is probably we would never have discussed this aspect of the movement. The farmers of this movement wanted to solve the farm crisis. They were united because of their problem and used a variety of methods to communicate to the rest of the nation that they were no longer going to put up with being treated unfairly. They expressed their ideas through their demonstrative actions and tried to help themselves and the general welfare of all Americans. Because they persisted in presenting their side of things, people listened. Communication was truly the key to understanding.